Well, hello everyone. This is the first video of a new series delving into the mechanics and data behind Kenshi. As such, this first video will be about simpler topics and getting started in understanding the basic systems, specifically regarding health and damage mitigation. However, if you don't mind, I would like to start off this series with a personal story of my very first Kenshi character. He was a Green Lantern male, and he spawned in the Holy Nation town that you are now watching. I started with a sort of pensive enthusiasm for this unfamiliar world. Starting a farm seemed just so incredibly thematic, the humble beginnings of every fantasy novel I've ever read. Well, while I was waiting for the crops to grow, I decided to go mine some iron, make some money. And I noticed some river raptors come over to eat the crops. I thought, well, the guards took them out pretty easily. Took a look at their stats, took a look at my stats. They're pretty weak. Besides, they're basically the equivalent of giant rats, right? Well, I stayed out of it, thankfully, until a wounded one came to eat the crops right next to my mine. Wounded. The weakest animal in the game. Injured. And I decided to take it on. And I died. This thing somehow took me down. I didn't land a single hit. It left me there, bleeding and dying. Went back to eat some wheat, and no one cared. No one came to help me. No one came to heal me. My first character lived less than a single day. Now, believe it or not, that's the moment that I fell in love with this game. Because Kenshi respects you as the player. It respects that you can make bad decisions. And it is willing to allow you to feel the consequences of those actions. Now, I strongly recommend that your first Kenshi experience be unfiltered. Jump in without expectations and just experience this world for what it has to offer. However, if you're ready to branch out and start exploring, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you live long enough to get to your destination, which is why I'm making this video first. So without further ado, let's jump right into a basic breakdown of the house system. So here we have our friend Nutto. We're going to take a look at those green bars at the bottom of the screen first. Let's bring those up for a better look. Your head, chest, and stomach are your vitals. This is your primary concern for protecting. If they go below 0, you go unconscious. And if they go far enough negative, you die. The blood bar functions the same way, but you lose it and regain it differently. You can increase the limit of your blood bar by training strength. You lose function of your limbs if they go below 0, and if they go far enough negative, you lose the limb permanently. These individual health bars can be different colors. Green means good condition, red means cut damage, which is caused by slashing weapons. Black means stun damage, which is caused by blunt weapons. And white means cut damage that has been bandaged. Stun damage will heal itself slowly over time, while cut damage will actually get worse over time if left untreated. Healing cut damage requires healing kits for fleshy characters and robotic kits for robotic characters or limbs. Robotic limbs have a gray shade instead of green, and will still heal slowly from stun damage as normal, but repair instantly from cut damage when treated. They also have a slowly degrading health bar as they take damage that can only be repaired in robotics repair bed. Cut damage is far more dangerous than stun. 1, because it causes bleeding. 2, because it causes wounds that degrade over time, even while you're unconscious. 3, it requires consumable items to heal. And 4 is the most common damage type you will face. If you hover over the toughness number in the far bottom left of your screen, you'll get this little pop-up that tells you your toughness XP rate, health KO point, wound degeneration speed, and damage resistance. Health KO point does not determine when you go unconscious, except from sustained damage, such as environmental factors or wound degradation. More importantly, it is used to determine whether or not you will get back up from an unconscious state. For instance, my health KO point here is minus 45. So if I were to finish my unconscious state with greater than negative 45 health, there's a good chance I could return to the fight. Wound degeneration speed is a modifier on how quickly your cut damage injuries, if left untreated, will deteriorate over time. And damage resistance does exactly what it implies, to the effect that a character at maximum toughness will take 3.5 times less damage than a character at 0. This is your most important stat for keeping characters alive, as not only does it reduce damage taken in the first place, but it also minimizes damage dealt over time by wounds and makes it easier for you to recover from a knockdown state. The only way to train this stat is by taking damage. One final note on the health bars is that being wounded, whether it be to your vitals or your limbs, will affect your stats, your combat capability, and your ability to keep yourself alive. Now if we come back to the status panel here and click on that little arrow to expand it, you can see your run speed. I'm sure this will come as no surprise to anyone, but the best way to not take damage is to not be in a fight. If you keep your run speed above 20, most things in the game cannot keep up with you. The one notable exception are big things, which with some practice you can dodge them anyway, just bob and weave, bob and weave. Another thing you can do is live in town. Houses are ridiculously cheap. Buy one, live in there, do your basic research, get yourself started before you go out and make your own settlement, and guards will protect you. It also means that you can fight on your terms. Instead of needing to protect your turf, you can just, pick and choose. Easy enemies? Alright, good. Get that experience. Tougher enemies? Well, you got a chance to fall back, let the guards take care of them, and then you get to take the loot. Or even ally yourself with another faction. One that is particularly easy to join is the Shinobi Thieves. Allies will protect you in a combat situation and heal you if you get injured or knocked out. This fits well with one of my main pieces of advice. You want to always have a fallback plan. Always have someone off to the side who is capable of protecting you, of saving you, of healing you and getting you out of that situation. Now, animals deserve to be mentioned separately, because they have a unique balance in this world. When you first start out, they will be incredibly dangerous because of how quickly they can attack, as you see now. And they do primarily cut damage, which is the most dangerous, and some of them will eat you if you go unconscious. However, once you get some basic stats, because they can't block, they become pathetically easy to kill. At that point, your greatest concern is being outnumbered. Now this footage here is from a modded game, where multiple enemies can attack you at a single time. In the base game, it wouldn't be quite this dangerous, but it is nonetheless pretty bad. Basically, all of these cannibals have stats in about the 20s, and I have stats in the 40s, so I'm significantly stronger. However, hit chances are percentages, based upon the stat differential. So, if you have 20 cannibals, that's a health bar of 20 times you that you have to plow through. That's a lot of times for a die to roll. And, well, you only have to roll badly a couple times to end up in a very bad situation. Another thing you have to watch out for is being staggered. Now this happens when you take big hits, especially unmitigated by armor. And during this time, you can be hit again and again and again until you recover, as you see here. The best way to avoid this is to train your dodge stat, which allows you to dodge out of a stagger. Now your most important stat for protecting yourself, aside from toughness, is aptly named melee defense. This is what determines whether or not you block an attack. Now if you're up against a particularly powerful opponent and you just need to buy time, you can activate block mode, which gives a significant plus 20 defense. However, you will not attack in this mode. And finally, let's take a quick look at armor. These floating red damage numbers can be enabled in the options. We'll be using the full data option. So you may be familiar with a screen like this, which shows up when you hover over a piece of armor. We're going to go over what each of these numbers actually means. And here are the damage numbers from the last clip. Right at the top, you can see that my head took a hit for 64 plus 5. That means 64 cut damage plus 5 stun. There are no parentheses, no subtracting, because my head is not protected by armor. Next, we'll jump down and take a look at the left arm, which took a total hit of 65 cut damage, reduced by 22 by armor. Now this one actually is as simple as it seems. 65 incoming damage reduced by a cut resistance of 32% yields 44.2 damage. It's a little bit higher than what you see on the screen because of rounding. Now stun percent is where things get a little bit more interesting. That's the minus 40% after a cut resistance number. That means that 40% of resisted cut damage becomes stun. And that calculation would look something like this. 40% of our resisted cut damage, being 22, is 8.8. Now while cut damage is significantly more dangerous than stun, it is still important to minimize both, since stun can still KO you. So we have another calculation to determine what our effective damage reduction is for this armor, which happens to be just under 20%, which is pretty good for high grade gear. But there's one thing we haven't talked about yet, which are the coverage values down below. See, left arm, stomach, right arm, and chest are all covered 100%. That means any hit to any of those limbs has a 100% chance to apply the protection you see on the screen. However, as an example, some armor only protects your stomach by 20%. That calculation would look like this. Your effective damage reduction times the 20% chance for it to apply leaves an effective damage reduction of less than 4%, which is absolutely miserable. Now what that actually means is that 1 out of 5 times your armor will apply, the other 4 times it will not. So sometimes it will take full unmitigated damage, and other times it will be reduced by 20%. And finally, you can see that the stomach values up top have significantly more reduced damage than you would expect from this jacket. That's because I'm wearing these samurai cloth pants, which have a 50% chance of protecting the stomach. So if you layer armor over individual limbs, both can apply. In this case, that 50% chance procced, and I got the full protection of both armors. The blunt resistance numbers are much easier to calculate. Simply take off the 24% damage that is shown on the screen. One note about stun percent is that stun conversion does not show in the damage numbers. So that 8.8 damage from the stun conversion will not be displayed, even in full data view. The only other things to worry about on your armor is the weight and the harpoon resistance. Harpoon resistance is damage reduction for all things ranged. Like you have your turrets, you have your crossbows. All of that is simple subtraction. If you get hit with 20 damage attack and it's a 14-point harpoon resistance, you take 6 damage. It's simple. Weather protection is a nice bonus, but unless you specifically live or are planning to travel into environments with particular hazards, it's not something worth considering. Also, most armors will have effect on your stats, namely athletics and stealth. The ones that hamper your combat speed are the worst, but they offer the best protection, so it's up to you whether or not it's worth it. On the topic of coverage, if you have to choose one specific vital to protect the chest. Now, we'll get into that later in another video, but basically your chest is the most likely to be hit. You may have noticed that most of these tips are not about reducing damage in a combat scenario. Instead, they're focused on understanding the risks involved in combat and avoiding ending up in an unwinnable situation in the first place. The reality of Kenshi is that if you get knocked out in a bad place, you're dead. Something could eat you alive, or you could stay unconscious by going below your KO threshold and then just bleed out in the sands. Now add to that you could have wounded legs from a fight, preventing you from escaping, or forcing you to engage in a worse encounter on your way back to safety. In the end, it's better to play tactically, and only engage when it benefits you to do so. Well, that covers all the basics. I'll certainly come back to this soon and do a more advanced version with more math, more detailed explanations. That's enough to get everyone started. Get out into the world and, survive it. You can also look forward to my weapon damage breakdowns. I've been working on calculations for animals as well. Recently just got the math for big things. I'll be taking a look at bone dogs next. Well, that's it for today. Hopefully you all got something worthwhile out of this. If you would be interested in watching my live streams for testing or getting footage for these videos, please let me know down in the comments. I am willing to do that if there is interest. But aside from that, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Turmeric out.